Rocha loved it when his buildings seemed to levitate. He always played with the airiness of giant concrete forms. And here, he also tried to play with that idea. You can see, it's just a little bit. And here in Belém, he also left his mark, quite a powerful one. But his most famous creation is the monument that was built specifically for. Let's start our walk at the Belém Cultural Center. It's actually an important place and massive. It's not just one building, is it? Here, as they say, it is what it is. This.
Hello, friends. We're back with another architectural walk through Lisbon, and this time we're in the Belém area with Alexander Novikov, an architect and one of the founders of the School of Architectural Thinking for Children. Hi, Alexander.
Hello, Vladimir. Thank you very much. I'm glad to take a walk with you.
Alexander Novikov, an architect, along with art historian Elena Karpelova, founded the School of Architectural Thinking for Children in 2016. This is an educational international project that operates both online and offline. Here, they teach students to think like architects, to explore, design, present, and integrate various disciplines to create films, books, and architectural projects. The latest of these, Bombinea Vunki, as part of the 2024 Venice Art Biennale, attracted media attention and was highly praised by specialists.
The Belém area is a historic district, yet it boasts a significant number of very interesting and notable buildings of modern architecture. Here, Alexander will tell us why they are here and what is so remarkable about them.
With pleasure. We are in the Belém district of Lisbon. Yes, as Vladimir has already mentioned, a historic and very important area, over 100 years old. It all began with the Geronimos Monastery, an old important site, and in fact, it was from here that the Portuguese explorers set sail, heading to various countries, discovering Brazil and India, reaching the farthest points of Asia. And now, in fact, this district has become a facade for the whole country, for all of Portugal. Anyone who at some point became a leader of Portugal wanted to say something about this district, its architecture, to build something significant. And in fact, this race continues even now, and to this day we see modern buildings. The bigger, the better, they have expressed. That's roughly how it is considered here, in Belém. But let's start our walk from the cultural center of Belém. It's actually an important place and massive. It's not just one building. As they say, it's a whole city. If we talk about the image, it really does resemble a city. It has its own streets, its own buildings, and quite a complex structure. To build this building, an international competition was announced, many works were submitted, and in the end, the project of an Italian architect was chosen. This architect wasn't exactly reaching for the stars, but he occasionally managed to build some important, large, and quite commercial projects. And here he took first place and built the cultural center. In fact, when it was built, especially the architects, they were quite anxious. The thing is, nearby is the Geronimos Monastery, which is truly a gem, both architecturally and culturally. And then a gigantic chest appears, a whole city that somewhat overshadows the Geronimos Monastery. Nobody liked it at first, but now, as is often the case, everyone has gotten used to it. It all comes down to ambition again. The kings had ambitions to build a larger monastery and to tell their own story. Currently, the building of the Belém Cultural Center was handled by the right-wing party in power at the time, and they decided to do something significant. And it wasn't just important for the sake of it, not just to look at us, we're the right-wing party. The thing is, Portugal was entering the European Union at that time, and it was important for them and for all of Portugal to create something iconic. So, they built a massive center, a fantastic center, and we'll take a stroll through it together. I'll tell you all about it. In fact, lately, you've probably noticed that architecture is becoming more than just architecture. There was the 20th century, a powerful thing, when architects were like gods, truly. Now, it's all come to a close, and the star architects are already writing their memoirs, and gradually stepping away from the business. Well, it's like we don't want to give up our positions, and architecture has become more than just architecture. Architecture is now thinking. Architecture is art. It's anything and everything. It's the social issues that architects are solving. So, during our little stroll, we might pay less attention to the stones, meaning the specific buildings. For example, we're passing by a lovely spot right now, where they sell the best ice cream in Lisbon. All the kids who come here They go there before and after their classes and enjoy some excellent Italian ice cream. We are in the central square of the building. Yes, a building, because there's actually a whole town in the cultural center of Belém, and this massive square hosts a lot of events. They often invite modern, cool architects here, who create stage designs specifically for this square. On one side, we have Maat, which is actually the best museum with the finest collection of contemporary art in all of Portugal. There will be Picasso, Niki de Saint Paul, Andy Warhol, and many, many others. If you need culture, this is the place for you through these doors. And beyond that, actually, there's a whole town. What's here? Cafes, ice cream shops, books for sale, there's a conference hall, and a large number of other things. There's a theatre here, again, a contemporary art museum. Well, there's a lot of everything related to culture. There's also the Ensol Garage here, the southern garage, so to speak. This is the center of architecture. And there's a school of architectural thinking and work. I've always been interested in the image of this building. Well, when you're inside, it feels a bit dry. There's some greenery, but overall, it seems like it's all been dried out by the sun, and it's unclear why exactly. This isn't Lisbon's old architecture. I was scratching my head until I saw the buildings and cities in Morocco or Yemen. It's actually very similar. It seems to me like a rethinking of the Manueline style. That style of the explorers, but already in our 21st century. So it's a separate city with its own towers, its own streets, but it all feels quite desolate, Asian, perhaps even African, but definitely colonial, I would say, meaning those countries that Portugal later arrived in. Well, besides the fact that there's its own internal structure, streets, houses, and so on, there are also gardens. And these gardens are located in strange places. Sometimes they are below ground level, sometimes they are above ground level, and there are even vertical gardens. And when you pass by this building, say, on the train, you see that it really resembles the hanging gardens of Semiramis, and again it looks like some eastern city, standing somewhere in the heat under the blazing sun. We are currently in an olive grove, which is actually situated at about the height of the 3rd floor. And here are the olives, and they are not young at all. These are old olive trees that grow here in a modern building. I also wanted to say that besides being this official facade of Portugal, which makes Portugal seem like the coolest in the world, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't as much, but the process continues. Besides everything else, this area is a cultural center because there is a really large concentration of museums here. Here, there is the Belém Cultural Center, a carriage museum, the Geronimos Monastery, a museum of folk crafts, and the Tesouro Real, where incredible jewels of all the Portuguese kings are displayed. One of the important historical buildings is the Belém Tower, which is hundreds of years old and relates to the Age of Discoveries. In fact, apart from being a lovely and very interesting building standing in the water, it also serves as a sort of boundary, or even, I would say, a gateway to all of Portugal, because beyond it lies the ocean.
The ocean, which began hundreds of years ago, is full of dangers. It's not where your border guards swim, but where bloodthirsty pirates attack you. It's the open ocean, which has no boundaries and is endless.
And this tower marked the country's boundary. Each era, every important ruler or significant historical period in Portugal has tried to make its mark here. During Salazar's rule, there was Monsieur Salazar, who, of course, wanted to make a statement about himself and remind everyone that Portugal once ruled the entire world. And he also left a significant mark in Belém, but his most famous creation is the monument, which was built specifically for the World Expo. However, this World Expo was not like the current ones where all countries gather, but rather Portugal's own World Expo. In other words, Portugal was essentially saying that we still own the whole world, or at least, we want to. And who was exhibiting there? Obviously, all the colonies, Brazil, African countries, and so on. And this monument became the centerpiece. The monument to the discoveries still stands. It was initially built, stood temporarily, then was demolished, but ultimately it was restored. And even now, not everyone can get used to it. The Portuguese still say, dictatorship. This monument is in such a prominent place. Maybe it could be without it, but for now, it remains there. We are in a gazebo, not just any gazebo. This is called a living sculpture. It is truly alive, but of course, it is all wrapped in plants. But the most beautiful thing is when the gazebo starts to bloom. It flowers in spring, and it is just covered in little flowers. It's very nice. The guys and I take breaks at the School of Architectural Thinking, and here we run around, climb, and are always filming from some high points. It's lovely for the little ones, and overall, it's very pleasant here. The gazebo really helps to stop the heat, and you can truly relax. Interestingly, there's also the concept of the CCB expansion, where the cultural center begins to absorb spaces it deems less important through culture. For example, this garage insula is a very large space that used to be just a parking lot, meaning it was a garage. The name has remained Southern Garage, but now architectural exhibitions, various symposiums, and of course, the School of Architectural Thinking are held here. In architecture, the age of discovery is reflected in its own architectural style, known as manuline. There are interesting decorative elements on the facades that are usually visible. These are plant elements, but the most important thing is that there are elements related to the process of geographical discoveries. Anchors, ropes, elephants, rhinoceroses, all those curiosities were placed on the facade, and of course, plants, including exotic ones. We are currently in a small garden next to the Geronimos Monastery. Here is the living part of the facade, meaning that the plants which were once placed on the facade in stone 500 years ago are now planted and growing here. We are near the presidential palace. As someone scarred by dictatorship, it's quite pleasant to walk past a building behind whose walls you might meet the head of state. There's a lot of interesting history associated with this palace. It's a summer residence, meaning he doesn't live here. Interestingly, after Salazar, the first president, an idiot as the Portuguese now call him, was a democratic president who lived here all the time. He liked the lavish villa in the heart of beauty, but after that, no one dared to live here. The president can live here now, but he doesn't because the upkeep is quite something. Just imagine, a whole palace needs to be maintained for one messiah to relax. And that's why important official meetings and events take place here. But again, everything is democratic. The president can go out to a cafe, often getting photographed with people. So, he's not a divine figure, but someone you can approach and, as Vladimir says, grab a chat, because he swims in his nearby house in Cascades, and you can have a nice chat with him. The Carriage Museum is a brilliant thing, massive and powerful. There are gigantic columns, and they're practically non-existent. It was built by a laureate, no less, of the Pritzker Prize, Paulo Mendes da Rocha, a Brazilian, a really cool guy. The Left Party was in power then, and this was their grand statement participation in the Belém. Yes, meaning something powerful needed to be built. Voila, how about? A Pritzker Prize laureate, Paula Mendes Dorothea, built this building towards the end of her career in 2015. And in fact, he is one of the few architects of that time where you can really see the changes from what he was doing at the start of his career to what he ended with. This is already the pinnacle of his architectural creativity. And here, if you look at his early projects, they actually resemble that avant-garde modernist school of Brazilian architects from the 20th century. Well, the first one, of course, is Oscar Niemeyer, Voila. Oscar Niemeyer, yes, there's a certain poetics to it, I would even say. An eroticization of forms. Yes, they are delicate, beautiful, poetic. This chap was heading in the same direction for at least half of his career, but then eventually he shifted to a more brutalist vision of architecture. And voila, here it is. This doesn't make him any better or worse. It makes him Rocha. Paula Mendes Dorothea is not with us, but if you watch his interviews, how he talks. Oh, by the way, how he talks about his architecture. He'll certainly read a bunch of poems, and rather than talking about stones, he'll discuss how people live, how his construction workers wash under a cold shower somewhere in Sao Paulo, how he looks out of the window and sees the beach but wants to see the ocean. These are the kinds of things that are connected to life. This is precisely the direction modern architecture is heading now. We don't need forms, we need something connected to life. We influence people, we help them live, rather than just building monuments to ourselves. Again, when you listen to what Rocha said specifically about the Carriage Museum, he actually felt awkward the whole time. He understands that a massive building needs to be constructed. Why massive? Because, well, firstly, they don't build small buildings here. This is Belém. And secondly, it was necessary to accommodate a gigantic carriage museum. This, if I'm not mistaken, is the largest collection of historical carriages. And that's why the building has to be enormous. But when you incorporate such a massive volume, firstly, you could overshadow the Geronimos Museum, and secondly, the problem is that there are many small houses around, and they are all interesting and charming. They are part of Lisbon. Poor Rocha tried to pay some tribute to this historical old architecture, struggling as best he could. The volumes are what they are. You can't make them smaller. He talks about how he tried to fit the building in, which actually consists of two parts. One is the Carriage Museum, and the other is the administrative section. We're approaching the administration now, and the building itself is pink. The building is made of reinforced concrete. It's powerful and doesn't shy away from that, but the administrative building is pink. Why? Well, because he says, "This is how I show my respect for the historical architecture around." And up top, on the roof of the pink part, where the administration is, there's a pool, so there's water right there. You can't see it from anywhere until you get inside the building. Rocha loved it when his building seemed to levitate. He always played with the airiness of giant reinforced concrete forms. And here he also tried to play with this idea. You can see there are very few supports here, literally about 10 or so, and the building is just gigantic. On the main facade, there are only 3 columns. The columns are powerful, but this is again an attempt to levitate, an attempt to make something gigantic feel airy. When the Red Bridge, the Salazar Bridge, appeared, a new viewpoint opened up onto Belém and Lisbon. And when you drive over the bridge or look at Belém from the other side of the Tagus River, you see that it is actually a gigantic space, meaning it's a very long coastline that you want to somehow hold with a grand object. And all these objects make attempts to convey that this shore somehow belongs to us. These large buildings are trying to shape this shore, but in reality, no one has succeeded so far. If you are on the other side of the river, you will see that the Geronimos Monastery seems to disappear somewhere, and the Cesabe also fades away, and the Carriage Museum is practically invisible. Only the Salazar Monument sticks out, but it doesn't hold the entire shore either. But if we are to talk about the scale that is truly needed here and which really holds everything together, it is the Red Bridge itself and the statue of Christ. They are in the right scale for the entire surroundings. According to the original design by Rocha, there was to be another large circular form in this part where we are. I'm not exactly sure what it is. I think it's a garage, but in the end, it wasn't built. They constructed the main buildings now. This bridge is also part of the project. It serves as a very important connection between the shore and the museum, and indeed, the whole area. And Paulo Mendes de Rocha clearly understood this and said that there is great meaning in this bridge. Well, overall, it turned out great. But still, no one really wants to walk across bridges when they can just cross the road.
And of course, his modernist essence is still evident here, because these are not just stairs, they are ramps.
And now we will approach a place via this beautiful ramp that has nothing to do with modern architecture. I even call it the Stalinist Empire, the Salazar era. This is the river station. From here, ferries go to the other side of the Tagus River. What's interesting here, Mendes de Rocha would understand me perfectly. Rocha, again, is about life, not about stones.
Here you can enjoy a drink and sit back, literally watching all of Beeline as it flows like a river into the ocean. Imagine how these desperate half-pirate sailors set off to discover other countries, have a good time, and pleasure is the most important thing in Portugal, and even more so in Brazil. Here we are, Vladimir, approaching the MAAT, the Museum of Architecture, Art and Technology. What do you think of the building?
A beautiful building. It's been integrated here in a very delicate way. Here, of course, I think the wave idea is quite banal, but nonetheless, it's quite fitting.
Fabulous! I completely agree with you. A British architect designed this building. She is a graduate of the AA, the Architectural Association, but that's where Zaha used to study and teach. Voila, here's the building. So, what else did they try to do here? I would add that they played with the history of azulejos. Azulejos are these ceramic tiles.
So, the entire facade is finished with ceramics, but the ceramics are unusual in shape and scale. Well, they're quite low scale, traditional in azulejos, but the elements are significantly larger.
Exactly, it's a sort of rethinking, and there are no colors at all. It's all white. Well, great, we're paying tribute to the local culture. Well done, British architect. She's not a superstar at all. She's not a hugely famous lady, but somehow she managed to create an important, very modern building for all of Portugal. No doubt about it. The roof, voila, beautiful. It really looks like a complete landscape, a luxurious view. There's a bridge behind. Interestingly, this bridge is by a British architect, and before that, we walked across the Rocha Bridge by a Brazilian architect. Everyone definitely needs to build a bridge because of the railway. You can't get away from it. You need to cross somehow. Pedestrian bridges in their own style. And now, Vladimir, I would like to sum up. Who has bigger balls? Once again, we have the USSR on the right, the Carriage Museum on the left, and in the middle, Geronimos, which is an empire altogether. In the middle, we have Salazar's dictatorship, and this is our last practical object built by the EDP company. In fact, it's already a corporation. EDP. What is EDP? It's an energy company. Essentially, it's the Portuguese Gazprom. So, it's already like a corporation, a business. And voila! Who is stronger? Who is brighter here in Belém? It's up to you to decide.
Alexander, thank you very much for the walk. I think it was very interesting. I also learned something new for myself, even though I thought I had seen all this many times before. Friends, please write which of the buildings you liked the most. Or maybe where you would like to go for an architectural walk next time. If you haven't seen the first episode, be sure to watch it as well. And if you liked this video, do share it with your friends, as it will help them too. They will learn something new and interesting. And of course, it won't hurt us for promoting the channel either. Give us a like and something nice in the comments. Bye! See you in the next video on the next walk.